Has provided daily TV and radio warnings about the usage of power and saving of electricity, yet people still take those warnings very lightly. How serious is the situation in our country?
Well, I think we must accept that the mere fact that we're having all these warnings is in itself a signal that we are facing a serious ongoing situation. And I just want to pick up on a remark which was made by Eskom recently in the last few days. That although there's an on-off situation with the crisis, that in fact that the national grid does remain vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So I want to widen that and say, well, if the national grid remains vulnerable, so does the South African economy. Mm-hmm. And you're reaching a point now where if you're going to have this industrial load shedding happening, this is beginning to negatively affect business. Every time the system gets rattled, business people get unhappy, they get uncertain. So quite clearly, we've got to take a view on several options, because if you look at the longer term issues, such as Medupi being delayed, that the fracking in the Karoo will be delayed. Nuclear power was mentioned by the President in the State of the Nation address, but that's also long term. It just seems to me that the medium term is opening up as a gap. What can we do in the next year or two to avoid these marginal situations? And obviously one of them is, of course, daylight saving.
But tell us about daylight saving time, or DST. It was I think the first time it came online was 1942.
Yes,
back.
that's in fact, we have been there before. During the Second World War, it was felt there was an overriding effort to save coal, to make the war effort succeed. So for a couple of years, we in fact had daylight saving, and it worked quite well. And we should actually look up some of the evidence of indeed how it worked. We have it in Namibia on our doorstep, so there are no geographical problems here. We're in the same longitude, latitude, and so forth. And it's helpful at the peak times. That's where 1%, if you can save 1%, because that's how Eskom has got its back to the wall. It really has got its back to the wall here. So even 1% being saved at peak hours by going for, indeed, this kind of daylight saving is going to help. And I was very interested last night when I was watching the television news to see that Spain, which is now recovering from its financial crisis, what are some of the reforms it should be, in fact, undertaking to sustain, this new recovery? Lo and behold, one of the issues, they're going for daylight saving. They think another hour will help to make the country more productive and so forth. We are more focused, I think, on the energy side. And we could say, well, let's try it for 3 years to help us get through this very difficult period.
But so explain the concept, because it sounds very easy, but explain the concept. How does it actually work?
Well, it just means that in some areas you'd have to get up earlier in the morning, and in some areas you'll be able to stay up later. You're spreading the time over the day in a more effective way. I suspect probably 1 hour is the maximum we can do given our geographical position. But it could make a big difference. It's that margin that makes the difference. So, of course, it will influence people's behavior and how they go into their time management during the day. So there can be a net saving from that. And the other point is that you will recall last week there was a very good energy conference in Pretoria, and there the Minister of Energy did say, look, I'm going to tell Parliament, I'm going to tell the Portfolio Committee to speed up levelling the playing field between Eskom and other producers of power in the future. I would add to that and say it is fashionable now for our portfolio committees to have an immediate meeting on a serious situation. I think they should not only look at the legislative changes that might be needed, which are longer term issues, but should also have a hearing on some short term issues, the cogeneration, the daylight saving. Let's look at it. What are the pros and cons? Because really, we don't have a margin for error here, which could send out very negative messages about the economy.
Daylight saving, as you indicated, is introduced already in Namibia for the last couple of years. They're an hour behind our time. If it's supposed to be introduced here in South Africa, how will it benefit the economy?
Well, because I think what will happen is you'll be spreading the peak loads We are very focused on the energy side. I think if it wasn't for the energy challenge, we wouldn't be having this debate. We're not in the same position as Spain, for example, although it's interesting that they think this is one of the measures they should use. I would certainly say you are then spreading the peak, you are improving productivity, you will get better cooperation, hopefully, between employers and employees about flexi time. There are a number of options that could spin off this, but we need to investigate it, and I think that the Portfolio Committee in Parliament on Energy should have a hearing on these and other shorter-term steps to avoid these weekend warnings. And yes, you know, we're okay this weekend, but next weekend we may not be okay. So I think we really do need to take a more holistic view of how to fill the gap between the challenges we're facing now and the new capacity that will kick in, but only after a few years.
Now, 80 states already in the world are utilizing or have introduced and applied DST, Daylight Saving Time. For South Africa, as you just indicated, we should really look at it, but will it benefit consumers for that matter?
Oh yes, I think it will. I mean, there will be some people who won't like it. That's why I think you must have a debate. There will be some people who will not want to feel that they have to get up a little bit earlier in the morning, but there'll be other gainers. For example, if you look at the tourism sector, the leisure sector, those are sectors that can gain. And in a way, I don't want to exaggerate its claims, but it may even create a few more jobs. So, you know, I think we really got to look at all the range of options so that we can save energy in the short term that does prevent these sort of crisis warnings, the lights may go out. It's also not only unfair that you should have this continuous downloading on the industrial side, but also that if this constantly happens, when you have a potential investor, he says, look, well, what's going to happen in the next couple of years? Should I invest? Should I build a factory? What should I do if I cannot get the power or the assurance of power, or that the power that is there will be available for the time being? So I think we've got to look at all the options, and perhaps the Standing Committee in Parliament would be the best vehicle.
Talking about Parliament, the budget speech is coming up. Expectations from your perspective?
Well, I think that given the challenges that the Minister faces, I think most people want to see realism and indeed balance. And on his track record, I'd be very surprised if in fiscal terms, he doesn't have a good story to tell. He needs to balance the books. He needs to send out that message that he has control over the government's checkbook. There are big challenges, and if you take a snapshot picture, I think one is hoping, and also with an election coming, so one is hoping that he will have a good story to tell, but there are some structural issues that have to be addressed, and I think from the broad point of view, say from the point of view of the business community, they will be testing it against the National Development Plan. They'll be looking beyond this year and say, look, it's fine. If you can handle the snapshot picture, that's fine. You can balance the books. We can hold these credit agencies at bay for longer. That's all good news. But there are other structural issues which are embodied in the National Development Plan, and we want to test the budget and other decisions of government, especially once the election is out of the way, against the National Development Plan and its goals. Unless we work together under that heading, we're not going to find that future ministers of finance are not going to have this ongoing problem, because out of growth comes a better tax base, and that's in everyone's interests.
Professor Parsons, thank you so much for your insight once again.
Thank you.
That was Raymond Parsons. Professor Raymond Parsons is a professor for the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at the